Gonna do a nice short little ghost story reading from my book, Death in Global Folktales, for Halloween / Dia de los Muertos season. This one's called The King of Yomna, that being Hell, Yomna. And sorry for mispronunciations of all Korean terms. I will do my best. But again, it's a short story. So originally I found this, by the way, in a book from 1899 called At a Winter's Fire by Bernard Capes. He was also the author of The Lake of Wine. Let's take a look at the table of contents really quick. The Vanishing House, Dark Dignum, A Lazy Romance, Black Ven. Yeah, we'll have to check some of those others out at one point. And here we go. In Yunnan County, Wanghai Province, there was a certain literary graduate whose name I have forgotten. He fell ill one day and remained in his room, leaning helplessly against his armrest. Suddenly, several spirit soldiers appeared to him, saying, "The governor of the lower hell has ordered your arrest." So they bound him with a chain about his neck and led him away. They journeyed for many hundreds of miles and at last reached a place that had a very high wall. The spirits then took him within the walls and went on for a long distance. There was within this enclosure a great structure whose height reached to heaven. They arrived at the gate. The spirits who had him in hand let him in. And when they entered the inner courtyard, they laid him down on his face. And glancing up, he saw what looked like a king seated on a throne. Grouped about him on each side were attendant officers. There were also scores of secretaries and soldiers going and coming on pressing errands. The king's appearance was most terrible, and his commands such as to fill one with awe. The graduate felt the perspiration break out on his back, and he dared not look up. In a little, a secretary came forward, stood in front of the raised dais to transmit commands, and the king asked, "Where do you come from? What is your name? How old are you? What do you do for a living? Tell me the truth now, and no dissembling." The scholar, frightened to death, replied, "My clan is so-and-so, and my given name is so-and-so, and I am so old." By the way, all of that is actually in the story. It says so-and-so for all that stuff. "And I have lived for several generations at Yunnan, Wanghai Province. I am stupid and ill-equipped by nature, so I have not done anything special. I have heard all my life that if you say your beads with love and pity in your heart, you will escape hell, and so have given my time to calling on the Buddha and dispensing alms." The secretary, hearing this, went at once and reported it to the king. After some time he came back with a message saying, "Come up closer to the steps, for you are not the person intended. It happens that you bear the same name, and you have thus been on the list. You may go now." The scholar joined hands and made a deep bow. Again the secretary transmitted a message from the king, saying, "My house when on earth was in such a place in such a ward of Seoul," the city, Seoul, Seoul. "My coming here is long, and the outer coat I wear is worn to shreds. Ask my people to send me a new outer coat. If you do so, I shall be greatly obliged, so see that you do not forget." The scholar said, "Your Majesty's message given me thus direct I shall pass on without fail, but the ways of the two worlds, the dark world and the light, are so different that when I give the message, the hearers will say I am talking nonsense. True, I'll give it just as you have commanded. But what about if they refuse to listen? I ought to have some evidence as proof to help me out." The king made answer, "Your words are true, very true. This will help you. When I was on earth," said he, "one of my head buttons, an insignia of rank, and consequently a valuable heirloom, that I wore had a broken edge, and I hid it in the 3rd volume of the Book of History. I alone know it, no one else in the world. If you give this as proof, they will listen." The scholar replied, "That will be satisfactory, but again, how shall I do in case they make the new coat?" The reply was, "Prepare a sacrifice, offer the coat by fire, and it will reach me." He then bade goodbye, and the king sent him with 2 soldier guards. He asked the soldiers as they came out, who the one seated on the throne was. He is the king of Hades, said they. His surname is Pak, and his given name is U. They arrived at the bank of a river, and the two soldiers pushed him into the water. He awoke with a start, and found that he had been dead for 3 days. When he recovered from his sickness, he came up to Seoul, searched out the house indicated, and made careful inquiry as to the name, finding that it was no other than Pak O. Pak O had 2 sons, who at the time had graduated and were holding office. The graduate wanted to see the sons of the king of Hades, but the gatekeeper would not let him in. Therefore he stood before the red gate, waiting helplessly till the sun went down. Then came out from the inner corners of the house an old servant, to whom he earnestly made petition that he might see the master. On being thus requested, the servant returned and reported it to the master, who, a little later, ordered him in. On entering, he saw 2 gentlemen who seemed to be chiefs. They had him sit down, and then questioned him as to who he was and what he had to say. He replied, I am a student living in Yunnan County, Wanghai Province. On such and such a day I died and went to the other world, where your honorable father gave me such and such a commission. The 2 listened for a little, and then, without waiting to hear all that he had to say, grew very angry and began to scold him, saying, How dare such a scarecrow as you come into our house and say such things as these? This is stuff and nonsense that you have talked. Pitch him out, they shouted to the servants. He, however, called back, saying, I have proof. Listen, if it fails, why then pitch me out? One of the 2 said, What possible proof can you have? Then the scholar told with great exactness and care the story of the head button. The 2, in astonishment over this, had the book taken down and examined, and sure enough, in volume 3 of the Book of History was the button referred to. Not a single particular had failed. It proved to be a button that they had missed after the death of their father, and that they had searched for in vain. Accepting the message now as true, they all entered upon a period of mourning. The women of the family also called in the scholar and asked him specifically of what he had seen. So they made the outer coat, chose a day and offered it by fire before the ancestral altar. 3 days after the sacrifice, the scholar dreamed, and the family of Pak dreamed too, that the king of Hades had come and given to each one of them his thanks for the coat. They long kept the scholar at their home, treating him with great respect, and became his firm friends forever after. Pak O was a great-grandson of Minister Pak Chom, a royal censor who died in the Japanese War of 1592. While he held office, he was honest and just and was highly honored by the people. When he was mayor of Haiju, there arose disputes between him and the governor, which proved also that Pak was an honest man. When I was at Haiju, Choi Yu Chom, a graduate, told me this story. The end. Like I said, a fun little story. Has a happy ending, so that's nice for a ghost story, and one where the protagonist ends up going to hell. Some interesting folkloric conventions in there. The crossing of moving water or river to cross between the land of the living and the dead. You see that all over the world in different ways. Thought that was interesting. The high wall, kind of the land of the dead, being somewhere that you can get to physically. It's on the same plane, but it's far away. And then once you get there, there's a high wall. That's in a Venezuelan indigenous tale that I have elsewhere in this book. So that was kind of cool to see too. What else? Immortal being the king of Hades, being the king of hell. That's an interesting touch. Like how did he become that? And, you know, the family mourned him once they got the message, but they would have known that he already died. So anyway, that was interesting. And so not too familiar with other traditions that have that kind of a thing, an actual person dying and then becoming the king of the underworld. And that is the story. Hope you liked it. Thanks.